You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a very exciting, for me, guest here today. So before we dive into all of that, I'm going to turn it over so he can introduce himself and let you know where you can find him online.
Hi everyone, I'm Lee Morgan. I'm responsible for quite a few books. Don't hold it against me. But yeah, you can probably best find me at leemorgansbooks.com, which is my website. And I've got a bunch of, social media stuff and a Patreon and all kinds of things. So yeah, I'm looking forward to people picking up my new book, The Rag and Bone Man, which is just starting to ship out now, and I'm excited about that. Yeah, I guess in terms of writing, that's who I am. I've also sort of spent quite a few decades in traditional witchcraft, which is, I guess, the basis from which I write my work. Yeah, I've been an office holder, I've been a non-office holder, I've worked in covens, I've worked outside covens, I've worked here in Tasmania or La Traviata, and also in England where my family come from in Dorset. So yeah, that's I suppose me in a nutshell.
Well, I'm very excited to have you here today and to chat about your newest book. But before we dive into that one, I do have to say for listeners who are thinking like maybe the name sounds familiar, and that would be because I have been recommending A Deed Without a Name since the very beginning of this podcast in 2020. It's a great book for traditional witchcraft. So that might be why this author's name is familiar to you because I've been talking about it for 5 years. In case you were wondering. So
Oh, thanks.
I have heard from other authors that the switch between fiction versus nonfiction writing is difficult for them, but you seem to do that without a hitch. So I am curious as to where you started and how you are able to make the shift back and forth.
Right, yeah. Well, I always wanted to be a fiction writer. That was where I originally sort of found my voice. I've always been a storyteller, and I think a lot of my magic has come out of that without really fully realizing what I was doing. I think I've cast quite a few glamours on some of my school friends during storytelling at an early age, and I came to realize that, sort of almost later on, that itself was a form of magic. And I wrote my fiction stuff first. And it was only later, I think, after university that I started to work on some of my nonfiction, and that was actually when I got published, was for nonfiction. But I think because that passion was driving me, I went about with one of my books called Sounds of Infinity to sort of showcase what I could do in terms of the different styles of writing that I could do. And I think being a rather quiet, introverted child, writing came upon me as a way to sort of express who I was on the inside. And yeah, I didn't have many friends, and storytelling was a way that I could take some of my very sort of, well, I guess, florid inner life and share it with other people. And for me, that change between the two styles doesn't feel as significant as it does for some people. It comes down to what I was talking about with my new book as well, where I was asked to do this again, to focus on the head, heart, and hands aspect of things.
So it sounds then like storytelling came first for you before
Hmm.
witchcraft, or was witchcraft always in the background?
Um, I'd almost say storytelling came first, but I would go as far as to say that that's where my magic was leaning without me knowing it was magic. if you know what I mean. Like, I was finding ways to manipulate people's reality in a relatively amoral kind of way without realizing that I was scaring people, for instance, in some of those situations. Um, but yeah, I think when I did realize that that was, a thing I needed to be aware of, I think that was around about the time I realized that I was a witch, and that's where my energy started to go. But I never stopped writing fiction, even as a teenager. It was all through me.
I do feel even your nonfiction writing has like a very lyrical style to it. There's just something that comes across as like otherworldly. I really enjoy your writing.
Oh, thank you. That's what I try for. I don't really believe that there is such a. I have to say this carefully because otherwise it sounds like I don't believe in my nonfiction, which I really do. I think the problem is that sometimes I believe in my fiction as well, in the sense that I believe that both of them describe different realities. And yes, I would definitely say I am going out of my way to sort of make nonfiction quite lyrical.
I enjoy that. I enjoy that style of writing, and I particularly I like being manipulated by the author into, you know, another world experience where I put the book down and I'm like, where am I? What just happened? I've been
Mm,
missing for the, last 2 hours and completely absorbed in the
yeah.
story. That's like my favorite, you know,
I I
story to
think
read.
with books, it's more consensual with a book, though, isn't it? It's like one of those things where the person picks it up knowing that that's what you're going to do.
Yes, that's it. Knowing I'm going to just disappear for hours and
Yeah.
come back to reality sometime much later.
Mm.
So, for people who have not yet looked up the Rag and Bone Man, what can they expect out of this newest work from you?
Well, it's probably one of the ones I'm most excited about everything that I've written. And one of the reasons is that it's set here in Old Hobart Town. So it's the first time I've actually tried to write something in the city which I live near and have lived in, and that part of it means something to me. But I think there's also a much bigger thing going on in this book, and it might not have come into being if somebody from Crosscrow Books hadn't asked me to do this. But I think it was always there in the background, this idea that the Victorian age, that whole time period of the 19th century and the late 19th century, is kind of haunting this era. And I feel that there's a lot of odd similarities too in the fact that that era was right on the edge of opening up a scientific view of reality. There was the whole origin of the species where people were realizing that we may not have just been created by God, that we may have evolved. And that was a huge sort of change in people's consciousness. And I think for a variety of reasons that were well, I think people thought that spirituality and the scientific realm were quite close together. And I think that's where spiritualism as a movement came from, this idea of people talking to the dead through various raps and sounds and ectoplasm and everything. It was very physical, the idea that the dead was still with us. And in a very different way, I kind of almost feel like we're there again at a different level, but with a whole different level of science. So I think there's definitely a bit of theory in this story, the idea that that was an era that speaks to our own. And in the back of it, in the hands section, I sort of put together a little bit of a grimoire, which is only short, but it kind of gives you an idea how you can put some of the things that you've kind of learned through your head and your heart in that story into practice.
I really like the grimoire section, even though it was short. I do think it wraps everything up together like in a nice way because it does go from like research into creative writing. It's kind of like the best of both worlds of like all your works.
Oh, that's, yeah, so that's what I hoped.
No,
But
I think that's a very unique take on it because, like I said, some authors are very non-fiction, some are very fiction, and they find it hard to cross that division. And you have done that all in one book.
yeah, well, that was what I was trying for, and I hope that although the grimoire's short, I do feel it's important because I think that's where the work really comes to life in the person when they put that stuff into practice.
I think so too, and I know that my listeners always appreciate having that in their books as well because it just makes everything seem a little more tangible and not so woo woo off in space like it can't get back to
Mm.
a grounded reality of like what you just read, but then your grimoire does that for them, and I know my listeners love having that aspect.
Yeah, I think that's why it is simple too, because I wanted it to be something that would benefit from repetition, that you need to kind of keep repeating a lot of those practices to get the full results from them.
And speaking of repeating practices, you have talked about, you have been doing traditional witchcraft for many years. Is it something that's still prevalent in your life today? Do you have any practices outside of writing that you do daily?
Oh, yes. One of the things that I've been privileged to experience is that we live on a covenstead in the sense that everybody that lives here is a practicing witch in our coven, and that I wouldn't go as far as to say it's like a monastery for witches, but I would definitely say that we have a lifestyle which is definitely recognizing the sacred. Like every time I light a fire, for instance, I bless the fire in the name of Saint Bridget, and there's a whole sort of bunch of folkloric practices that happen in my daily life. Um, it'd be almost hard to root witchcraft out of my life, to be honest with you. Like I feel it's so, soaked into the fabric of it that it would be very difficult to remove it. I'd be in big trouble if we lived in the persecution era, I'm telling you. I'd be, people be coming after me.
Yeah, I could only imagine, and especially living in like a group setting like that where everybody's practicing witch, you would have been wiped out very quickly.
Well, that's not what I assume, to be honest with you. Like, I think once you write books, you kind of assume that you're first to go.
Yeah, you're the first target for sure.
Yeah.
I am also glad that we live in this
Yes,
area because we would all of the listeners today would be in trouble too.
that is very true.
And I think it's very interesting. I think the Victorian age is incredibly interesting. I love that you pulled that out and talked about that. And it's kind of fascinating how how much we've just learned and accepted in just like the last couple of hundred years, things like gravity or that the earth is round. Like we just are so
Yeah.
used to those
Mm.
those things as being like common knowledge, like of course they are, but they're relatively new developments in the history of mankind. So it's
And
kind of fascinating.
antibiotics, for instance, people were
Yes,
dying from an infection in a cut finger only quite recently.
I know, and it's just
Mm.
amazing to
It's huge.
see how far we've come with science in such a short amount of time, and how much there is left to learn, especially as that relates to spiritualism. Because I think they do go hand in hand, and there's just so much we don't yet know or understand. And I'm kind of excited to see where it goes in the next couple of years.
Me too. And I do feel weirdly that science now is kind of pushing on a lot of those things again with quantum physics and stuff, where we are questioning whether there could be parallel realities or duplicate realities, or it's kind of come round again to that same spot where we're going, oh, actually, maybe some of this actually is real.
Which is absolutely fascinating to me. I am
Mm.
not nearly smart enough to understand any of it or do
Oh,
any
me
of
neither. No,
that.
me neither.
Do
I'm
any
not
of
that
that
kind of
like
smart.
yeah, no, not that kind of smart. But I'm fascinated by people who are and like the constant things that I want to read all about it. I want to learn all about it. I want everybody to like report their findings to me, but I don't understand any of it.
Yeah, that's true. Hmm.
But it is just like I think it's just a really in this aspect is a really fun time to be alive. There's lots of other things that are not that fun, but in this aspect of being able to learn and grow in those areas is a lot of fun to see what kind of things come about.
Oh, I agree. I'm very excited to see what the place in the rise of witchcraft is as well. It's become a very popular thing, and what does that mean? What's our purpose in being here in such numbers?
And I love that. I love to see it grow. And I think it's kind of been on and up for a while. I think from having practiced for many years, and I as well have like seen like ebbs and flows in interest. There's always peaks and valleys with everything, witchcraft included, but it's been an upward trend, I feel like, for a while, which makes me happy because I want to see more people. I want to invite more people into it.
Hmm. Yeah, I do too. And I'm not a particularly gatekeepery person in terms of who uses the word, because to me it just is a word for anything which has been pushed to one side or made not mainstream. And I think there's a lot of things that fall into that category. And it's all intriguing to me. I don't even mind, not that I must admit I don't have a TikTok, but I have no scorn or issue with people that do. I consider it to be all very intriguing. I like to watch it, to be honest. I like to observe it.
And I mean, the things that are referred to as witch or witchcraft, 100 years ago, today is called modern medicine. So it's like,
Mm.
the things that we're calling witch and witchcraft today in another 100 years might just be commonplace, normal for everybody to be doing that or practicing something like that.
Which I think would be interesting. I believe there's a lot of things that have been pushed down into that underworldly, very physical, visceral kind of magic that are making a comeback for a reason. That's just my little 2 cents on it.
I love that because and I think that comes out in your writing and in the Rag and Bone Man as well, um,
Mm,
because it's just this idea of the spirit world in general of something that like we scientifically we're nowhere near understanding any of that, but
mm,
we all know that like something exists. We've all experienced strange dreams or interactions with the spirit. There's always just something that each one of us has a story about, so there's something there. I don't believe that there's just nothing, like nothing happens to us after we die or there's no other realities. I feel like that's crazy to believe that there's got to be something.
mm. I often think about that though, because I think even though it's not our best friend, that rationalist idea that there's nothing out there maybe is what saved us from the witchcraft persecutions. Like maybe we needed to go through that phase to get where we are today so that there would be space for this.
That's an excellent point. If we were all so vocal about this many years ago,
Mm.
we would all been
Well, that's
wiped out.
right. We would have been in big trouble, wouldn't we? And I think that rationalism, that kind of scientism, if you want to call it that, was needed to get us away from the fear that used to drive anti-witchcraft persecution.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I think
Mm.
there's quite a few. I think even there's probably listeners to this podcast who are even in their present day not in a situation where they can be vocal
No.
about their practices, even now, based on location or just their family, their people around them. So obviously, where we live and talking online like we are, we're very vocal about it. But I know, and it's hard for us to imagine that other people are not.
Mm.
But it is a very common reality for a lot of people still.
Absolutely. I offer the occasional sort of folk doctoring help to people from a distance through my Patreon, and often I work with people who can't in any way make it clear what they do in their home life. They have to keep it completely undercover even today, so it does still exist. I mean, it's better than being swum through a river to be tested for whether you're a witch, but it's certainly, yeah, still a problem for some people.
Yes, I appreciate not being drowned.
Yeah, me too.
Every
I
time,
love that for us.
yeah, so every time I open my mouth, I don't have to worry about being thrown in a river. I appreciate that.
Yeah, me too.
I do have to say. So, do you have any advice to give to beginners who are just picking up works on traditional witchcraft or works on this more spiritual side of things for the first time? Because I think, there's a lot of modern witchcraft that leans more Wicca based, um, and in some of those beliefs and practices, and that's a little bit different than what traditional witchcraft offers. So, do you have any advice for those witches who are picking up traditional witchcraft for the first time?
Definitely, yeah, I do. One of the reasons that I chose to explore spiritualism is I've come to the conclusion after quite a couple of decades of watching people and teaching people and writing for people that there's almost a spectrum when it comes to having a witch mark is what we would call the thing that marks you out as being a witch. It's not as clear as that though, like it's not black and white, it's not like people have them or they don't. I actually think there is a little bit of a spectrum, like a sliding scale. And I think that spiritualism, where people got invited into the parlor to hold hands and to provide almost like a human battery sounds cold, but I don't mean it like that. I mean as in like the life force to bring through that spirit. I think a lot of covens are formed out of people that are on different parts of that spectrum, and being around other people who are deeper into that, who have a stronger witch mark, who have more witch fire, it tends to get them moving, it get them going, get them burning, you know? And I think that for that reason, it is good to be with others. Like, I wouldn't go as far as to say you can't be a witch alone. You totally can be a witch alone. But I think if it is possible for you, not necessarily to be in a coven, but to be around another witch, you know, somebody with more experience, it is worthwhile. And I do have, and I'm lucky to have some people that I can look to as elders that are more experienced than I am, that I can rely on and I can go to ask questions. And that is a lovely thing. If you can get that, even if it's online, it's better than not having it at all. Because those elders are kind of like elders in Indigenous societies where they have actually done the miles and served their community and served their spirits. That side of things is super valuable. Um, but I would also say that to a degree, traditional witchcraft is something that comes for you rather than you coming for it. You can come for it. You can certainly engage in folklorically driven witchcraft, which is filled with, you know, folklore. And I think there's value in that because that kind of intelligence from folklore that has been passed down from body to body. You know, it carries that sort of fetchy intelligence, that bodily intelligence. But at the same time, with traditional witchcraft, you kind of have to invite it. And I think you need to sort of make a good space for it in your life. You need to think about how would it affect me if I started to have experiences with spirits or spirit flight, which flight that I hadn't planned on. Say it happened on a night before work. How would this, you know? So you've got to kind of clear a space for it. Is what I'm saying. Um, my belief is if you want it that badly, it may well come to you. I don't think people want it for no reason. I think when people want it very badly, it's a sign that they have a fate with it, and I think that something will come to them. So I hope that answers the question to some degree.
Oh, absolutely, it does. And I think that a lot of listeners and people who have reached out before on like the topic of traditional witchcraft, it's something that like sought them out. I feel
Yes.
like, they maybe listened to the podcast, but they didn't come back to one labeled with traditional witchcraft until they were really ready for it. And they were like, wait a minute, I listened to this, it didn't resonate, and now I'm back a year later because it's calling to me.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
I think a lot of people will understand that it finds you when you are ready for it. I think
Mm.
that's, true of a lot of spirituality and witchcraft practices that, maybe somebody listening to this episode right now is like, no, not for me. This one doesn't resonate with
Yeah.
me. But then next year, they're going to come back around, maybe, October 2026 and be like, wait a minute, everything in this episode is making sense to me now. And it's all just a matter of timing.
Yes, and I also think one of the other reasons that I'm teaching publicly is that there are some things in traditional witchcraft that I think would be of benefit to people even if they're not traditional witches.
I I enjoy that and I appreciate that because I do
Mm,
think um sometimes I guess because there's so many layers to traditional witchcraft that sometimes it does seem a little more gate kept than
yes,
folkloric witchcraft. But I think that's just, because there's so much to learn.
there is, and also each tradition is different to the other as well. So there's different people with different attitudes, just like there is in any path, I think.
Absolutely. It's nice to be
Mm.
able to find teachers and resources online that are talking about it openly and publicly and being able to like direct someone to the right space to go to and the right teacher to go to.
Yes, and I think that teachers and elders kind of pop up the same way spirits do, in the sense that they come to you when you're ready for them.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I have
Mm,
had many things come across, my internet or my Instagram feed where I wasn't searching for it. It has nothing to do with content I was looking at before. And then all of a sudden it pops up and I'm like, wait a minute, this is exactly what I need. And I didn't know that I needed it.
yes, there's definitely things guiding everything.
Even though I'm not the biggest social media fan and not a huge fan of the algorithm, sometimes there's bigger
Oh
forces at
God,
work that are,
I
that are
don't
working in
think
my favor.
anybody is a fan of it, are they? I'm not a
It's,
fan.
it's the worst. It's the worst.
Mm,
But I do feel like sometimes the universe is pointing me in the right direction. There are bigger forces at work that are taking over my internet usage lately, and I appreciate that.
yes,
give,
indeed.
give me a little more guidance than just the doom scroll that works for no one.
Yeah, that's true. It's easily done.
It really is. I think that is definitely
That's the idea.
that's the idea, and
Yeah.
it even is, with witchcraft content, even that, gets popular on Instagram and TikTok, and it just keeps feeding it to you. That's like the whole design of of
Yes.
the scroll. So even that is like, as much as I love it, that can be too much as well. So I think that happens sometimes with traditional witchcraft in particular, is that there can be a lot of overwhelm when you first get started or first try to dive in. 'Cause like you said, there's so many different routes to take and so many different traditions, different teachers out there that you could potentially learn from, follow from. And I do think that that is one area that's easy to get a little lost when you're getting started.
For sure. And I think for people who do teach it, there's a certain skill set that you have to develop in terms of what you can talk about and what you can't talk about, which is just a very simple thing on the surface, but different to any other time in history because now we've got this whole internet thing, so you've got to be aware every time that you talk about the things that you will talk about, the things you won't talk about, the things that you're oath bound not to talk about. But there's also in my tradition a whole lot that I can talk about and do talk about, and I think that some of that stuff is almost like a repressed part of Western occultism that's been under the surface for quite a while, and it's kind of ready, I think, to join the conversation.
I think so too. And I agree it's an overlooked part because maybe it's not as aesthetically pleasing. Is that the
Yeah, no, it's
the right
not at
term
all.
for, there's a lot of, pop culture witchcraft that comes up on Instagram that like is really pretty, like crystals look a lot better in an Instagram photo,
Mm,
than some of the standard tools and things that you're working with in traditional witchcraft, and there's no real good way to photograph spirit
No.
world and spirit walking, to put in an Instagram reel like you can with candles and crystals and things. So I think it's just been a little more in the shadows than
Mm.
some of the more like pop culture type witchcraft practices.
Yeah, so that certainly is a challenge with trying to get people to realize that you have books. It's very hard to photograph your own equipment, especially not just because some of it doesn't look pretty, which it doesn't, especially the stuff that I really use doesn't look particularly pretty, but some of it I also wouldn't photograph for various magical reasons too, so it does leave you in a bit of a quandary. Luckily, I live on 6 acres of forest, so there's lots of things to photograph that are not my ritual tools.
Definitely, that works out in your favor.
It
Absolutely.
does, it does.
Yeah, I think that I I think that's why I like highlighting authors and books particularly on this podcast, because it's my own preferred medium of learning and finding new information, grasping new concepts. I can sit down with like a physical book is my absolute favorite pastime ever.
Mm,
So
me
I think that's,
too.
my
Yeah.
best way to share knowledge and to talk with authors and put those books out there in the world for other people to know that they exist as a resource. I think that's just my favorite way to communicate with other people.
Yeah, it's always been my favorite too, really.
Do you have anything on the horizon that you want to work on next? Because I do feel like writers and authors are never done. There's always a project.
That's true. Um, I am working on the fifth book of the Christopher Penrose series, which is part of my witchcraft fiction world, which is I've just moved over to Rebel Satori at the moment with the first four books, and I'm working on the fifth one quite heavily. Um, I have another non-fiction book that may be sitting with a particular publisher that hasn't been spoken of yet.
Oh,
Um, and we're also on top of that about to convert or about to start the process of converting my non-fiction books to audio, which is going to be completely useless to me because I told you how I feel about that. But I'm getting asked by a lot of people saying that when they commute to work and stuff, they would love to listen to my books via audio. So that's all the stuff that I have happening for now.
that is a lot of things,
But
actually.
there's a lot of things, but I'm really lucky to have this as my mainstream of income. So this is what I do. And yeah, I'm very excited by my work.
I'm very excited about it too. I did not know that you're working on a fifth Christopher Penrose novel.
Mm,
I thought there were three. So I'm like, wait a minute, where's the fourth? I missed a fourth one. Obviously, I did.
yeah.
My bad. I
Uh,
need to go find it.
no, it's probably good that you missed that one because I finished that one when my tumor was still growing, and I don't feel I was quite on my full game. I rewrote it for Rebel Satori with my new capacities. And I'm really quite happy with the outcome of it. So, yeah, book four, if it's still in its virgin state for you, that's probably better than the other way around.
Okay. Good. I feel a little better about that. Well, I'm excited that number five is coming out. It, just in general of fiction, I read a ton of fiction, but anything fantasy and witchcraft related and witches in particular is just my favorite types of
Mm,
fiction books to read. Like I want to see more witches, more witch stories, and not just Wicked Witch and evil Swamp Witch and the terrible stepmother in Snow White. Like I want to read all types of witches. So that's
yes, yes,
it's my
I
favorite.
agree. That's why like both the heroes and the villains are all witches in my stories. There's good
Everybody's
guys.
witch. Everybody is represented.
Yeah, that's it.
Love that. Thank you so much for being here today and chatting about the Rag and Bone Man, but about all of your works and traditional witchcraft, witchcraft in general. I appreciate you taking the time to just
No
share all
problem.
of your thoughts and for taking the time to be a teacher as well as a writer and teaching those things on the internet. I think is really important. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Listeners, I'm going to have everything that we talked about linked below, as always, and over in the show notes at witchwednesdays.com. So you can check out the Rag and Bone Man. You can check out the website and the Patreon if you are interested in learning more, signing up, if this episode on traditional witchcraft is calling to you. So you can find all of those things and order all the books that we talked about. And that is everything that I have for you guys this week. I will see you next week.
Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. And you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.